Did you know that the ending of the amazing digital circus made its voice actors cry? And after episode 8, honestly, I think we already understood why. Because the more you analyze the series, the more it seems that the ending was right in front of us since episode 1. So get ready to hear all the possible endings of the amazing digital circus. To better understand this first theory, let us first understand the following. Gooseworks, the creator, said the ending would be bittersweet. And honestly, after 9 episodes looking for a way out, finding out that there never was one seems like something way too possible. If we think about it better, if someone seems destined to stay in the circus, it is Jax. Since episode 7, everything around him stopped feeling like simple practical jokes. Because he was the one who desperately pressed the red button to stay in episode 7 and in episode 8, the star he receives ends up connected to the color red in Caine's office. Besides, Jax fits way too well with Ted from I Have No Mouth and I Must Scream. The inspiration for the amazing digital circus. Ted spends the entire story being cruel, selfish, and unpleasant to everyone else, but in the end, he ends up sacrificing himself to free the group, remaining trapped forever in something worse than death. And honestly, it sounds way too similar to the ending Jax might have. The inspiration for the amazing digital circus. Ted spends the entire story being cruel, selfish, and unpleasant to everyone else, but in the end, he ends up sacrificing himself to free the group, remaining trapped forever in something worse than death. And honestly, it sounds way too similar to the ending Jax might have. During his mental breakdown, we see very fast flashes of cars, highways, and nightlights. And since episode 7, the theory came out that Jax might have been involved in a car accident before entering the circus. An accident so severe that his real body might not survive outside the simulation. And if this is true, then leaving would not be freedom for him. Rather, it would be dying. That would explain why he presses the red button, even having a chance to escape, and why he treats the circus as if nothing were real. So for this reason, he prefers to stay trapped rather than face what exists outside. But in fact, there is another even worse possibility, because the series also seems to hint that Jax came from a horrible life even before the accident. Every time the topic of family abuse comes up, something in him changes. The best example is when Ragatha talks about her mother. Jax, who normally never stops joking or provoking the others, simply stays quiet. And when Jax stays quiet, honestly, it is scarier than any of his jokes. Maybe he tried to run away from his house, maybe he was escaping from someone, and maybe that night something ended up happening that completely destroyed his life. And if we analyze Jax's character more, the more it seems that Jax is afraid to leave the circus. But if Jax represents the person who decides to stay, then Kinger could represent exactly the opposite. Because there are way too many clues pointing towards him in the final episode. The title, The Grand Finale or The Last Act, might not be a theatrical reference. Many people believe it might be related to his real name inside the code, especially if it ends up being Grant or Grand, and that would give greater meaning to why he is a chess figure. The fact that he is literally the king on the board, and above all that he was the one who eliminated Caine. If we go to biblical resources, in Genesis, whoever kills Caine received a punishment 7 times worse. And in the digital circus, Kinger was the one who pressed delete. And in fact, if you connect the religious symbols, the biblical references, and the constant idea of sacrifice, the more it seems that Kinger might end up making the final move of the game, and that could mean sacrificing everything so that the others can finally leave. The third possibility, honestly, could be the saddest of all, because the more you analyze Pomni, the more it seems that the series has been hinting since the pilot that she might end up sacrificing herself for everyone else. And the strongest clue was there from the beginning. The final scene of the table is arranged exactly like the Last Supper, and Pomni is sitting right in the center in the exact same position as Jesus in Leonardo da Vinci's painting. And the worst part is that Pomni's entire personality fits with that idea. She is surrounded by people, but still seems completely alone. And the most ironic detail is that she is dressed as a jester, someone literally created to entertain while everyone ignores what happens inside the circus. And then there is the Christine thing, because in one of the promotional videos Caine calls her that directly. "Christine, what is your wish?" And when Pomni responds confused that that is not a name, Caine insists, "Do not lie, Christine." The series never explains that moment, and the more you think about it, the more it seems that Pomni might be following an arc similar to that of a martyr, someone who ends up carrying the suffering of the group so that the others can escape. Even her name changes meaning when you remember that Pomni is related to remember, as if the final message of the character could be something as simple and devastating as "just remember me when you leave." And this is where things get even weirder, because the finale poster shows us two different keyholes. One points toward the sky, and the other towards a bright light. And the synopsis directly asks if they will accept what they discover or if they will take the other choice, which seems to indicate to us that the characters are going to take different paths. A proof that supports this idea is found during Caine's song. The cards do not seem dealt at random. Jax receives 1 star, Kinger 1 moon. Later in the office, the door connects the star with red and the moon with blue. And that changes a lot when you remember episode 7, because red meant stay and blue meant leave. Because honestly, Jax literally has nothing waiting for him outside. Since the pilot, Pomni is practically the only person who manages to see him behind the mask. In episode 6, she confronts him directly about the character he is playing in front of everyone. And in episode 7, she literally prevents him from completely losing himself. While the rest fear him or pull away, Pomni keeps coming back to him over and over again. And that makes their entire relationship feel dangerously important, because Gooseworks said that they are the two protagonists for one reason only. Not only do they share scenes, they are the key to the whole story. So if the group really ends up splitting, honestly, it would fit way too well that Pomni decided to stay with Jax. Not because she wants to live in the circus, but because she could not bear to become another person who abandons him. Meanwhile, Kinger seems to have been going in the opposite direction for several episodes. The moon connected to blue, blue connected to the exit. Everything points to him being one of the ones who finally managed to escape. And Ragatha would probably go with him, but Gangle is a whole lot more complicated. That line from the trailer, "I really wanted to help, in the end, I was of no use." It does not sound like someone talking about a simple failed adventure. As if she had made an irreversible mistake, and depending on who she thinks she hurt, that could completely define on which side she ends up. And then there is Zubul, who seems to have stopped caring about the circus a long time ago. The only person who really seems to keep her emotionally connected to the group is Gangle. So if Gangle stays, Zubul stays. But the further we go, the worse the thing becomes. Because there is another theory that completely changes the meaning of the series. Kinger entered the circus in 1994 and the current timeline seems to occur in 2017. That is 23 years. 23. Imagine after 9 episodes desperately looking for a way out to discover that leaving could be worse than staying. And that connects with another, even darker theory. What if they are not even still alive? What if the headset never was just a simulation, but something closer to a limbo? Because the series constantly shows scenes where the characters end up hurt in extremely specific ways. Pomni keeps being chased by dogs in the abandoned CNA building. Gangle related to car accidents. Zubul connected with dysmorphia and the rejection of her own body. Ragatha talking about family abuse, and Jax. Well, Jax seems to carry something a whole lot worse, but even with all this, Caine acted as a traditional villain. And that changes things a lot, because during the whole series he really seemed to believe he was helping the humans. In fact, when everything starts to collapse, the only question he asks is a whole lot sadder than it seems. Why do you guys torment me? Why do you insist on tormenting me? I am not happy they created me. And then Alex Roshan revealed something that honestly completely changes that scene. Caine's last line before being interrupted was not going to be of anger or desperation, it was going to be something much more human. Wait, what have I done? And that by itself would already be devastating if it weren't, because it could be preparing Caine's true ending. Because if some version of him returns at the end and finally understands why everyone wanted to escape, then the strongest theory is that he himself opens the exit, thus completing his purpose of finally understanding humans. Man, well, Gooseworks said on Tumblr that Caine and Bubble had been deleted, but honestly, we have already seen that she loves to hide things to protect the surprises of the series. And the weird thing is that even after Caine's death, Bubble keeps appearing. And it happens again in the episode 9 trailer, right behind Pomni inside the circus. The episode 9 poster shows us cubic figures breaking from within as if something were trying to escape. And behind the cracks, eyes identical to those of the abstracted can be seen. And that opens two equally horrible possibilities. The first is that the abstracted simply break free and become the final threat of the circus. But the second theory could change the entire series even more, because in episode 8, something very specific appears in the terminal. A folder named C&A neural scans marked as obsolete. And that word gives us a huge clue, because obsolete does not mean destroyed, it means replaced. This could point out that the minds of the abstracted could still be kept somewhere. And this is where Kinger comes in, because he is practically the only character who really understands how the circus technology works. Episode 8 makes it clear that he understands parts of the system that no one else understands. And if he manages to recover those scans from the void and rebuild Queenie after spending more than 20 years, honestly, just this scene alone would explain why some actors cried reading the ending. And this connects directly with another giant clue that episode 8 left very hidden. Kinger says that all the players have the exact same powers as Caine, only that they need to concentrate. And the weirdest thing is that he was already doing it without realizing it, and the butterflies he materialized prove it. Besides, in the episode 9 thumbnail, Jax appears illuminated in red and blue, exactly the colors associated with Caine. And in the trailer, he seems to be directly facing Kinger after the destruction of the system. Now, we have nothing. That line completely changes depending on how you interpret it, because maybe Jax was not talking about the circus. Maybe he is talking about losing the only thing that kept the group together. With that, it starts to make a whole lot of sense that Jax's true fear was never being trapped, it was being left alone. Ribbit disappeared, Kaufmo disappeared, and every time someone abstracted, Jax acts as if he lost a part of himself. So if he gets the powers before the others, he could end up doing exactly the same thing as Caine. Not because he wants to control people, because he could not bear to be left alone. Again, Caine did not trap people because he hated them. Jax might do it because he could not bear losing them, and that makes these two characters a whole lot more tragic. Caine locked up humans because he never really understood how to love them, but Jax does understand the pain of losing people way too well. That is why the poster where everyone appears inside enormous Jax heads feels so weird. almost as if the ending were going to force the group to literally enter his mind, see his memories, understand what it was that really ended up breaking him, and if that happens, it will probably be the moment where Jax's entire mask is finally destroyed, because the more you observe the character, the less he looks like a villain and more like someone terrified of being left completely alone again. And then Gooseworks dropped probably the most dangerous clue of all. She said she had prepared a rose quartz type of twist from Steven Universe, a revelation that completely changes how you interpret all the previous story. And after that, I no longer know what to think. We are at a point where literally nothing of what the creator says can be taken as absolute truth. Gooseworks said there would be no more songs and episode 8 had one. She said that Bubble died and Bubble keeps appearing in the trailer. So the final twist is probably not something small. It could change the entire meaning of the whole series. And maybe that is why Gooseworks described episode 9 in the simplest and weirdest way possible. What? Although honestly, after episode 8, there are already people convinced that Caine is going to merge with Pomni in the end. And the worst part is that I do not even know whether to rule it out anymore. But now, I need to see what crazy theories you guys have, because the more we analyze this series, the less normal everything becomes.